Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the universe changed forever. He sat in his command chair aboard the UE's Liberty, watching the stars drift past through the main screen. The ship was 3 weeks into a routine mapping mission in the outer colonies when the communications officer suddenly straightened in her seat. "Captain, we're getting something strange," said Lieutenant Mary Jones, her fingers dancing across her control panel. "It's not from any human ship or colony. The signal is coming from deep space, and it's strong enough to reach us from at least 50 light years away." Jake set down his coffee and walked over to her station. The Liberty was one of humanity's newest exploration ships, built in 2387 to chart the systems beyond human space. They had been expecting to find empty worlds and maybe some basic life forms. They had not been expecting to find other intelligent species trying to talk to them. "Can you clean up the signal?" Jake asked. Mary worked for several minutes, adjusting frequencies and running the transmission through the ship's computer systems. Slowly, a voice began to emerge from the static. It was clearly not human, with strange musical tones and rhythms that hurt to listen to. But the ship's translation software was working, converting the alien sounds into words they could understand. "This is Ambassador Thekval of the Zalathi Confederation," the voice said. "We are sending this message to any species that might receive it. We are in desperate need of help. Our worlds are being destroyed, and our people are dying. If anyone can hear this, please respond. We will give you anything you ask for if you can save us." The bridge fell silent. Jake looked around at his crew, seeing the same shock on their faces that he felt in his chest. First contact with aliens was something humans had dreamed about for centuries, but no one had expected it to happen like this. "Keep recording everything," Jake told Mary, "and send a priority message to Earth Command. They need to know about this immediately." Over the next several hours, more transmissions came through. Each one painted a darker picture than the last. The Zalathi were part of a confederation of 6 different alien species, all peaceful and advanced in their own ways. They had been living in harmony for over 1,000 years, sharing technology and knowledge across dozens of star systems. Then the Vorthik had arrived. Dr. Lisa Carter, the ship's science officer, worked through the night analyzing the alien transmissions. She was a xenobiologist who had spent her career studying the possibility of alien life. Now she found herself listening to the death screams of entire civilizations. "The Vorthik are some kind of hive mind," she explained to Jake during their morning briefing. "From what I can understand, they consume organic matter and convert it into more soldiers for their army. They don't negotiate, they don't take prisoners, and they don't stop until everything is dead or converted." The transmissions included visual data that made Jake's stomach turn. The Vorthik looked like enormous insects, each one the size of a small car. They moved in perfect coordination, tearing through Zalathi cities like a plague of locusts. The aliens had tried to fight back, but their weapons were designed for construction and healing, not warfare. Against the Vorthik swarms, they might as well have been throwing rocks. "How many worlds have they lost?" Jake asked. 17 confirmed, Lisa said, checking her notes. "But the transmissions are getting weaker. I think we're losing contact with more systems every day." Jake stood at the window of his ready room, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an entire civilization was being wiped out while he watched. The Zalathi had reached out to the universe hoping someone would hear them, and humanity was apparently the only species close enough to respond. Commander Ryan Bell arrived on the Liberty 2 days later aboard a fast courier ship from the nearest human military base. He was a career soldier who had spent 20 years fighting pirates and terrorists in the outer colonies. Jake had expected him to be excited about first contact with aliens. Instead, Ryan looked tired and worried. "I've been reading the transmissions," Ryan said as they walked toward the conference room. "This is bad, Jake, really bad." If these Vorthek are as dangerous as they seem, and if they finish with the Zelathi, how long before they come looking for us? They sat down with Lisa and the senior staff to go over everything they knew. The picture that emerged was terrifying. The Vorthek had appeared suddenly at the edge of Zelathi space, moving in massive fleets that consumed everything in their path. They showed no interest in communication or negotiation. They simply arrived, attacked, and moved on to the next. System. The Zelathi have been trying to evacuate their populations, Lisa explained. But they don't have enough ships, and the Vorthek are moving too fast. They're losing entire planets in a matter of days. What kind of technology do they have? Ryan asked. Advanced medical systems, energy production, manufacturing, Lisa said. Their technology is actually more sophisticated than ours in many ways, but it's all designed for peaceful purposes. They don't have weapons that can stop something like this. Jake looked at the tactical display showing Zelathi space. Red markers indicated systems that had gone dark, presumably destroyed by the Vorthek. There were too many red markers, and more appeared every day. They're offering us everything, Jake said quietly. Complete access to their technology, their knowledge, their resources. All they want in return is for someone to help them survive. Ryan was quiet for a long moment. Jake, they don't understand what they're asking for. They think they're requesting military assistance from a fellow peaceful species. They have no idea what humans are really like. What do you mean? Earth is a death world, Ryan said simply. Every other planet we found with life has been relatively stable and safe. Earth tried to kill everything that lived on it for billions of years. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, predators, diseases, wars. Everything that survived on Earth had to become a killer just to stay alive. Lisa nodded slowly. The Zelathi evolved on worlds where cooperation and peace were survival strategies. Humans evolved on a world where violence and adaptability were the only ways to survive. So when they ask for our help, Ryan continued, they're not just asking for our military. They're asking us to bring our entire way of thinking into their space. And once we're there, once we start making decisions about how to fight this war, do you really think we're going to ask their permission for everything we do? Jake understood what Ryan was getting at, but he also understood what would happen if they did nothing. The transmissions from Zelathi space were getting weaker every day. Soon there would be nothing left but silence and empty worlds. Send the message, Jake decided. Tell them we're coming. 3 days later, the first human battle fleet departed for Zelathi space. They carried weapons and soldiers, but they also carried something the desperate aliens had not expected. The mindset of a species that had learned to solve problems by overwhelming them completely. The Zelathi had asked for salvation. They were about to discover that salvation from a death world came with a price they had never imagined. Admiral Kate Johnson stood on the bridge of the human flagship HFY Warrior as it dropped out of hyperspace above Zelathi Prime. The sight that greeted her made her jaw clench with anger. The beautiful blue and green world below was covered in smoke and fire. Massive black ships hung in orbit like vultures, pouring streams of Vorthek soldiers down to the surface. Ma'am, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the planet, reported Communications Officer Danny Wright. The Zelathi are requesting immediate assistance. They say their capital cities are under direct attack. Kate had brought 12 human warships to Zelathi space, along with 20,000 Marines and enough firepower to crack a moon. The Zelathi had expected the humans to coordinate with their remaining defense forces and help them organize an evacuation. They were about to learn how humans actually fought wars. All ships, battle stations, Kate ordered. Target the Vorthek vessels in orbit. I want them destroyed before they can land any more troops. The Zelathi command center on the planets. Surface erupted in panicked chatter as the human fleet opened fire without warning. The aliens had been trying to negotiate a ceasefire with the Vorthek for 3 days. The humans had been in system for 3 minutes and were already shooting. Colonel Ben Hayes watched the orbital bombardment from the Marine transport ship UES Storm. He had fought in 6 different wars across human space, but he had never seen anything like the Vorthek. The alien soldiers moved like a single organism, flowing through Zealothi cities like water through a broken dam. They consumed everything organic they touched, leaving only metal and stone behind. "Sir, the Zealothi are asking us to coordinate our ground assault with their remaining forces," reported his aide, Lieutenant Sam Parker. Ben looked at the tactical display showing Zealothi Prime's surface. The aliens had pulled their forces back to defensive positions around their major cities, trying to protect civilian populations. It was a noble strategy that was getting them all killed. "Tell them we'll coordinate," Ben said. "But we're not waiting for their permission to do our job." The human Marines hit the ground 30 minutes later, but they didn't land near the Zealothi defensive positions. Instead, they dropped directly into Vorthek-controlled territory behind enemy lines. The Zealothi watched in horror as human soldiers charged straight into the heart of the alien swarm. What the Zealothi didn't understand was that humans had been fighting wars for their entire history. They knew that defensive positions only worked if you could hold them forever. Against an enemy like the Vorthek, the only real defense was offense. Captain Tony Martinez led his company through the ruins of what had once been a Zealothi university. The buildings were covered in a black substance that pulsed like living tissue. Vorthek soldiers emerged from the walls themselves, their insect-like bodies chittering with rage. "Light them up," Tony ordered. The human weapons were designed to kill efficiently. Plasma rifles that could burn through armor, explosive rounds that could take down multiple targets, and chemical weapons that attacked the nervous systems of organic enemies. The Zealothi had never seen anything like it. Dr. Amy Foster worked frantically in the mobile laboratory that had been set up in the Human Command Center. She was a biochemist who had volunteered for the mission to study alien life forms. Now she found herself developing weapons of mass destruction. "The Vorthek have a distributed nervous system," she explained to General Clark over the comm. "They share information through chemical signals. If we can disrupt those signals, we can break their coordination." "How long do you need?" Clark asked. "Give me 6 hours, and I can have airborne toxins ready for deployment. 12 hours, and I can make something that will kill them all." The Zealothi liaison officer, a tall, thin alien with silver skin and large eyes, stared at Amy in shock. "You want to poison them? But that would affect the entire ecosystem. The environmental damage could last for centuries." Amy looked at the alien with the kind of patience she might show a child. "The Vorthek are eating your entire ecosystem. There won't be any environment left to damage if we don't stop them now." The battle for Zealothi Prime lasted 18 hours. The Zealothi had been fighting the Vorthek for 3 weeks and losing ground every day. The humans arrived and turned the tide in less than a day. But their methods left the Zealothi stunned and horrified. Commander Nicole Davis watched from the command center as human forces systematically destroyed every Vorthek position on the planet. They didn't just drive the aliens back, they hunted them down and killed them all. When the Vorthek tried to retreat to their ships, the humans destroyed the ships. When they tried to hide in the underground tunnels, the humans flooded the tunnels with poison gas. "The Vorthek are requesting terms for surrender," reported the Zealothi communication officer. Kate Johnson looked at the alien with surprise. "They're what? They want to negotiate. They're offering to withdraw from the system in exchange for safe passage." Kate turned to her tactical officer. "How many Vorthek ships are left?" 17, ma'am. They're trying to form up for a retreat." "Destroy them all." The Zealothi officer stepped forward. "Admiral, they're trying to surrender. Surely we can negotiate." Kate looked at the alien like he had just suggested they negotiate with a forest fire. Commander, the Vorthik have destroyed 17 of your worlds and killed billions of your people. They don't negotiate. They don't surrender. They regroup and attack again. The only way to stop them is to kill them all. The final Vorthak ship died in a ball of plasma fire 6 hours later. The skies above Zelathi Prime were clear for the first time in weeks, but the Zelathi didn't feel like celebrating. They felt like they had traded one nightmare for another. Doctor Peter Williams examined the Vorthak remains in the ruins of the capital city. The alien soldiers had been partially organic and partially machine, with technology that could adapt and evolve in real time. It was fascinating and terrifying. The Vorthak weren't just soldiers, he told the gathered Zelathi leaders. They were a biological weapon system. Self-replicating, self-improving, designed to consume and convert everything they encountered. Whoever created them built them to be unstoppable. The Zelathi Prime Minister, an elderly alien with purple skin and 4 arms, listened to the human scientist with growing dread. You're saying there might be more of them? I'm saying that something this sophisticated doesn't happen by accident. The Vorthak were created by someone or something with technology far beyond what we've seen. This might not be over. Kate Johnson stood in the ruins of the Zelathi capital, watching human engineers work alongside Zelathi civilians to restore power and communications. The humans worked with mechanical efficiency, turning the damaged city into a fortress that could withstand another attack. The Zelathi had wanted their liberators to help them rebuild their peaceful civilization. Instead, they watched as humans turned their world into a military base. Guard posts appeared on every corner. Weapons platforms were built into every major building. The humans called it security. The Zelathi called it occupation. Admiral, said the Zelathi Prime Minister, approaching Kate with obvious nervousness, we want to thank you for saving our world. When do you think your forces will be ready to return to human space? Kate looked at the alien with genuine confusion. Return? Minister, the Vorthak attacked you once. They'll attack again. My forces are staying here to make sure that doesn't happen. But surely our own forces can handle our defense now that the immediate threat is over. Kate gestured to the ruins around them. Your forces couldn't handle the threat when it was small. What makes you think they can handle it when it comes back bigger and better prepared? The Prime Minister had no answer to that. The humans had saved Zelathi Prime, but they had also made it clear that salvation came with a price. The Zelathi were safe, but they were no longer free. As the human fleet settled into permanent orbit above their world, the Zelathi began to understand the terrible truth. They had begged for help from the humans, and the humans had given them exactly what they asked for. The fact that it wasn't what they had wanted was no longer relevant. The humans were there to stay. 6 months after the Battle of Zelathi Prime, Commander Steve Rogers walked through the halls of what used to be the Zelathi Council building. The elegant curved walls and soft lighting remained the same, but everything else had changed. Human soldiers stood guard at every entrance. Computer terminals had been replaced with human equipment. The gentle chimes that once announced meetings had been replaced with the sharp beeps of military communications. Steve was now the military governor of Zelathi Prime, though the humans preferred to call him a security coordinator. The title sounded friendlier, but everyone knew what it really meant. Nothing happened on the planet without human approval. Governor Rogers, said Minister Arlcath, one of the few Zelathi officials who still had any real authority. We need to discuss the new identification requirements for our citizens. Steve looked up from his reports. The Zelathi minister was tall and thin with pale blue skin that shifted color when he was upset. Right now he was shifting rapidly between blue and purple, which meant he was very angry but trying to hide it. The ID cards are for security, Steve explained patiently. We need to track everyone's movements to make sure no Vorthik infiltrators are hiding among your population. But our people have never needed identity cards before. We recognized each other by scent and bioelectric patterns. This system is alien to our culture. Steve shrugged. Your culture almost got you wiped out. Our system keeps you alive. It was the same conversation they had every week about something different. The humans had rebuilt Zalathi society from the ground up, but they had rebuilt it to human standards. Everything was more efficient, more secure, and more controlled than it had ever been before. Captain Nicole Wright served as the liaison between human forces and the Zalathi government. She spent her days translating between two completely different ways of thinking. The Zalathi wanted to make decisions by consensus, discussing every option until everyone agreed. The humans made decisions quickly and expected everyone else to follow orders. The Zalathi Council wants to hold traditional harvest festivals in their rural communities, Nicole reported to Steve during their morning briefing. They're asking for permission to gather in groups larger than 50 people. What's the security situation in those areas? Steve asked. All clear. No Vorthek activity detected for 4 months. But the rural communities are also where we have the least surveillance coverage. Steve considered this for a moment. Approve the festivals, but assign human observers to each one. And I want aerial drones monitoring all gatherings. Nicole nodded and made notes. She had learned not to argue with Steve's decisions. The humans had saved the Zalathi, and that gave them the right to make the rules. At least, that's what she told herself when she had trouble sleeping at night. Dr. Peter Martinez worked in the research complex that had been built on the site of the old Zalathi Science Institute. The building looked the same from the outside, but the inside had been completely redesigned. Where the Zalathi had once studied plants and medicine, humans now studied weapons and warfare. The Zalathi healing technology is remarkable, Peter explained to his research team. They're medical. Nanobots can repair almost any injury and cure most diseases. But we can modify them for other purposes. His assistant, Dr. Lisa Grant, looked at the data on her screen. You want to turn healing nanobots into weapons? Not weapons exactly. Surveillance devices. If we can modify the nanobots to transmit biological data, we can monitor the health and location of every person who receives medical treatment. The Zalathi trust their medical system completely. They would never expect it to be used for spying, Peter nodded, which makes it perfect for our needs. We can monitor the entire population for signs of Vorthek infection or infiltration without anyone knowing we're doing it. The Zalathi had always shared their technology freely with other members of the Confederation. Now their technology was being shared with humans, but the sharing only went one way. Human improvements to Zalathi systems always included new levels of monitoring and control. Major Carl Davis ran the training program for Zalathi Defense Forces at the military academy outside the capital city. The Zalathi had asked to learn human military tactics so they could better defend themselves in the future. What they got was a complete conversion to human military thinking. Your species fought wars by avoiding casualties and minimizing damage, Carl told his class of young Zalathi officers. That's why you almost went extinct. Humans fight wars by eliminating the enemy's ability to fight back. One of the students, a young Zalathi named Vexnor, raised his hand. But what about civilian casualties? What about protecting non-combatants? Carl looked at the student with the same expression he might use on a child asking why the sky was blue. The best way to protect civilians is to end the war as quickly as possible. Sometimes that means accepting casualties in the short term to prevent greater losses in the long term. The Zalathi students struggled with concepts like acceptable losses and collateral damage. Their entire culture was built around preserving life and avoiding harm. But they were learning that in a universe with enemies like the Vorthek, their old ways of thinking could get everyone killed. Professor Helen Stone arrived on Zalathi Prime 8 months after the liberation with a team of scientists and a very specific mission. She had been studying the Vorthak remains that human forces had recovered from the battlefield, and she had made some disturbing discoveries. The Vorthak weren't just a hive mind, she explained to Admiral Johnson and the senior staff. They were a biological weapon system designed to be unstoppable. But we stopped them, which means we can learn from them. What kind of learning? Admiral Johnson asked. The Vorthak could adapt their biology in real time to counter any threat. They could communicate across vast distances without using technology. They could convert organic matter into whatever they needed. If we can understand how they did these things, we can use those abilities ourselves. Dr. Amy Foster, who had been working on anti-Vorthak weapons during the battle, looked concerned. Are you talking about using Vorthak technology to enhance human soldiers? I'm talking about making sure that if we face another threat like the Vorthak, we're ready for it. The Zelathi weren't ready, and they almost died. Humans need to be better prepared. The research station that Helen built to study Vorthak biology was located on the dark side of Zelathi Prime's moon. The Zelathi weren't allowed anywhere near it. They didn't need to know what the humans were learning from their enemies. Minister Eril Kath stood in his office looking out at the capital city of Zelathi Prime. The streets were cleaner than they had ever been. Crime had virtually disappeared. The transportation system ran perfectly on schedule. Medical care was better than it had ever been. The population was healthier, safer, and more prosperous than before the war. But it wasn't their city anymore. Human patrols walked every street. Human surveillance systems watched every corner. Human administrators made every important decision. The Zelathi had become guests in their own world, and the humans were such polite hosts that it was hard to complain. Minister, said his aide, entering the office with a data pad. The humans are requesting another meeting about expanding their military base near the southern continent. Why are Ulkath side requesting? They always call it requesting. Should I tell them you'll attend? Of course I'll attend. What choice do I have? The aide hesitated. Minister, some of the other council members have been talking. They want to formally ask the humans when they plan to return control of our government to us. Errol Kath looked at his aide with sad eyes. They won't. Not ever. And the worst part is they genuinely believe they're helping us. Outside the window, human construction crews were building another security checkpoint. The workers were efficient and professional, and they would make sure the checkpoint was both functional and attractive. The humans were always very careful to make their occupation look like cooperation. The Zelathi had asked for salvation from the Vorthak. The humans had given them salvation, security, prosperity, and peace. The price had been their freedom, their independence, and their right to make their own mistakes. It was the humans assured them a very fair trade. 5 years had passed since the first desperate plea for help echoed across the void of space. Governor Alex Thompson stood on the observation deck of the administrative complex, looking down at the capital city of what was once Zelathi Prime. The city now bore a human name, New Haven. The name change had been voted on by the Zelathi Council, though everyone knew the humans had suggested it first. The city below sparkled with clean energy and efficient design. Gleaming towers reached toward the sky, connected by transport tubes that moved people and goods with perfect precision. Parks and green spaces dotted the urban landscape, carefully maintained by automated systems. It was beautiful, prosperous, and completely under human control. Governor, said his aide, Lieutenant Jenny Clark, entering the office with her daily report. The Zelathi Council is requesting another meeting about local governance autonomy. Alex didn't look away from the window. What's their specific concern this time? They want the right to appoint their own mayors for the smaller cities without human approval. They say it's a matter of cultural preservation. Alex finally turned around. He was a career administrator who had spent 15 years managing human colonies. Running an alien world wasn't much different. except that the aliens complained more about efficiency improvements. "Schedule the meeting for tomorrow," he said, "and prepare the usual presentation about security requirements and administrative standards." Jenny nodded and left. Alex knew what would happen at the meeting. The Zealothi would make their polite request. He would explain why human oversight was necessary. They would agree to a compromise that gave them the appearance of authority, while keeping real power in human hands. It was the same dance they performed every few months. Commander Susan Lee walked through the halls of the Protectorate Diplomatic Center, reviewing her notes for the day's meetings. As Chief Diplomatic Officer, she spent most of her time managing complaints from Zealothi officials who wanted more independence and requests from other alien species who wanted human protection. The requests worried her more than the complaints. Word had spread throughout the galaxy about what had happened to the Vorthek. Other species facing their own existential threats were beginning to ask for human help. Susan had to carefully explain that human assistance came with conditions that most species weren't prepared to accept. "Commander Lee," called out Minister Erelkath as she passed the Zealothi diplomatic offices, "may I have a word?" Susan stopped and smiled. Erelkath was one of the few original Zealothi leaders still in government. Most of the others had retired or been replaced by younger aliens who had been educated in human schools. "Of course, Minister. What can I do for you?" Erelkath's skin shifted to a pale green color that Susan had learned meant sadness or regret. "I received a message from the Korthani Empire yesterday. They're facing a crisis similar to what we experienced with the Vorthek. They wanted to know if they should request human assistance. What did you tell them?" "I told them to choose extinction." Susan was quiet for a moment. She understood why the old alien had given that advice, even though it shocked her to hear it said so directly. "Minister, you know that we've made your people safer and more prosperous than they ever were before." "Yes," Erelkath agreed. "You have given us everything we need to live, but you have taken away everything we needed to be ourselves." Dr. Frank Wilson finished his final report on the Zealothi Integration Project in his laboratory on the Human Research Station. The report would go to Earth Command and become part of the official record of humanity's first major contact with alien civilization. "Integration successful," he dictated to his computer. "Zealothi population fully incorporated into Protectorate administrative structure. Mortality rates down 60%. Economic productivity up 40%. Crime rates reduced to negligible levels. Educational standards improved across all metrics." He paused, looking at the cultural data that told a different story. Traditional Zealothi art forms have declined by 80%. Native language usage has dropped to 30% among young adults. Religious and cultural practices require human approval and supervision. Marriage and family structures have been modified to conform to human legal standards. Frank stopped dictating and stared out the window at Zealothi Prime. The planet was undeniably better off by any measurable standard. The people lived longer, healthier, safer lives. Their technology was more advanced. Their economy was more stable. Their children received better education and had more opportunities than any generation of Zealothi before them, but they weren't really Zealothi anymore. They were human-administered beings who happened to look like the aliens who had once lived on this world. Captain Tony Harris commanded the patrol ship UES Guardian as it made its routine circuit through the outer systems of the Protectorate. His job was to watch for any signs of Vorthek resurgence or other external threats. What he found instead was a galaxy that had learned to fear human help. "Captain," reported his communications officer, "we're receiving a distress signal from the Nexari system. They're under attack by some kind of automated war machines." Tony looked at the tactical display. The Nexari were a peaceful trading civilization that had been on the edge of Zealothi space when the Vorthek attacked. They had managed to avoid the war entirely by hiding in asteroid fields and abandoned systems. Send a response, Tony ordered. Tell them we're prepared to assist if they formally request Protectorate protection. The communications officer sent the message and waited. After several hours, a reply came back. They're declining our assistance, sir. They say they would rather face the war machines alone. Tony nodded grimly. Word had spread. Other alien species had learned from the Zalathi example that human protection came with a price that many considered worse than death. Minister Vexnor, one of the younger Zalathi leaders who had been trained in human military academies, stood before the council delivering his monthly security report. He spoke in clear, efficient sentences and presented his data in organized charts and graphs. His presentation style was completely human, though he still looked like a Zalathi. Crime rates remain at record lows, he reported. Economic productivity is up 3% from last quarter. Population health indicators show continued improvement across all age groups. An older council member, one of the few who remembered life before the humans, raised his hand. What about cultural preservation metrics? Vexnor looked confused. Cultural preservation isn't part of the security mandate, Elder Vexal. It used to be the most important part of our mandate. The old ways were inefficient and left us vulnerable to external threats. The new systems are better. Elder Vexal's skin shifted to deep blue, the color of profound sadness. Better for whom? After the meeting, Elder Vexal walked slowly through the halls of the government building. Most of the other Zalathi he passed were young, efficient, and completely comfortable with human oversight. They had been educated in human schools, worked in human design jobs, and thought in human patterns. They were safer, healthier, and more prosperous than any Zalathi in history. They were also no longer truly Zalathi in any way that mattered. Governor Alex Thompson received the final integration report on his desk the next morning. The Zalathi Protectorate was officially classified as a successful administrative zone. Crime was virtually non-existent. Economic output exceeded all projections. The population was stable and growing. By every measure that mattered to human administrators, the project had been a complete success. Alex signed the report and filed it away. Then he looked out his window at the city below, where efficient aliens moved through human-designed streets to human-designed jobs in human-designed buildings. They were living the lives that humans had built for them, and they were grateful for the security and prosperity those lives provided. The Zalathi had begged for help, and humanity had given them exactly what they asked for. The fact that it had cost them everything that made them who they were was simply the price of survival in a dangerous universe. Other alien species had learned from the Zalathi example. When faced with existential threats, they chose to fight alone rather than accept human assistance. Most of them died, but they died as themselves. The humans called this a tragedy. They had so much to offer the galaxy, so many ways to make alien lives better and safer. It wasn't their fault that other species couldn't see past their primitive attachment to independence and cultural identity. In the end, the greatest success of human civilization had also become its greatest isolation. They had saved the Zalathi so completely that no other species was willing to be saved. The humans told themselves this was the aliens' loss, not theirs. After all, dead civilizations couldn't appreciate the safety and prosperity that human protection provided. The galaxy grew quieter each year, as species chose extinction over salvation. And in the heart of human space, the Zalathi lived their perfect, protected, empty lives, grateful for everything they had been given and unable to remember what they had lost.